Welcome, everyone, to Art Lounge Alley. This is Figure Drawing Basics Part 80. Getting up there. I'm your host, and just gonna jump into the stream. I'm gonna pick up where I left off yesterday, and that is completing the final example for lighting. I'm gonna try to do a quick overview of what I've been doing these past few days, including last week. It's just different busts demonstrating light source. So here's another example right here. This is a sculpture that I'm still working on. I'm gonna add eyes to it later, but it's perfect for things like this. If you have a lamp, you could move it around to get better light source. Whatever light source that you're looking for, it's perfect for that. It's also great for angling the face, right? So you could actually sit there and copy as you see it, and you could change it according to however you want the angle to be in, which is really great. I really do encourage you guys to jump into this. This isn't going to be you taking time away from drawing. This is going to be you contributing more to your drawing. You're going to understand the face better, you're going to understand the features better. So all around, it's a great investment. It's also really fun. I had a blast actually reconstructing it, kind of. If you guys have been following the stream these past few weeks, I guess, is when I really introduced this face, and I've been really playing around with it, trying to make it look even more realistic. It's great. It's a lot of fun. I do encourage you guys to jump into that. Clay isn't really that expensive, I would imagine. It's like $10-15 at most, but time well spent. Again, it's gonna transition into your drawing as you learn how to sculpt it, how to put the face together. There are excellent tutorials out there. If you guys would like to see a tutorial on something like this here, make sure you leave a comment. Let me know. And I'll be glad to add that to like a special stream at some point in the future and do like a step-by-step instruction, or just give you guys like an idea of where to start and how to build from it. But jumping into this, these are just busts, and each little diagram just shows where the light source is coming from. So without the detail, just kind of giving you a general idea of what it is. So for here, it's straight on the face. You could see shadows really forming underneath the chin, a lot under the nose, and everything else is pretty light. Notice that on both sides there are shadows forming, and that's because the bridge of the nose, and the nose in general, is protruding out of the face, so it's capturing a lot of the light. And depending on if the light source is a little bit more to the left or a little bit more to the right, you'll get shadows on one side or the other, just because of its shape. Because it's protruding, because it is this narrow, it's going to cast a shadow on whichever side is the opposite of the light source. And as you can see underneath the eyes, it's a little bit as well. So any part of the face that protrudes out is going to block light from anything around it. So, for example, the forehead really comes out in comparison to the eye sockets, right? So because of that, it's going to cast a shadow underneath that area. Same thing for the bottom of the nose. Because the tip of the nose protrudes out so much, it is going to cast a shadow underneath. And that's just something that you guys can observe in pretty much anything, right? Like any object that you put on the table, if the light source is coming from there, you're going to see that it's just going to block anything behind it. So because of how long it is, because of how thick it is, etc. And this is also why it's great to be able to sculpt it, because you could really understand that when it comes to the face. Anyway, so jumping into this one, you guys guessed it, the light source is coming from the left side directly onto the face, on the right side, that is, and it's casting a shadow on anything else. And then notice, as I bring the face down to expose it to more light in this angle as opposed to this angle, how everything starts to get more illuminated, especially the cheek area. Still, the shadow of coming from the nose is cast onto the face, but the cheek area is getting a little bit of sunlight there. The lips are getting some of that as well, but notice how the top lip, because it goes inwards and it's turning away from the sun, or the light source rather, it's also getting some shadow. Underneath the lip is the same case. The bottom lip protrudes out, casting a shadow underneath it, and then the chin area as well. Same as it is here. And this is a great example just to show that these light dynamics are applicable to like all faces. There are certain slight changes here and there, but in general, as you guys could see, the pattern is pretty much the same when it comes to the face. Also really important to note how it really is like a logic game if you think about the whole light source aspect. Like, avoid doing opposite shadowing. For example, if the light source is coming from the upper right, if it's from the upper right, then the shadow underneath the head isn't going to be on the opposite. It's not going to be on the right side where the light source is. It's going to be on the left. So if it's on the opposite side, the shadows are always going to form on the opposite side of the light source. So make sure you don't make that mistake. Don't just draw shadows as you remember them from another drawing or something else that you drew. Draw shadows based off of understanding of the light source, its direction, where it's coming from. And you could do that by observing the face. If you're looking at, let's say, a photo of some sort, right? You could just look at where does the shadow land on the bridge of the nose. Is it on the left or the right? So if it's on the left side, then you know the light source is on the right. If it's on the right side, you know the light source is on the left. And then from there, the pattern continues throughout the entire face and body as well. And then, you could look out for things like this, for example. Is it really light on the face? Or are there really dark shadows? If it's dark shadows, then you know it's a really close, exaggerated light source. If it's a little bit more illuminated like this, the entire face is illuminated, the shading is pretty light, then you know that it's a front view or a frontal perspective, and the light source is also frontal as well. Next, we got this one, which is the same as this, but less exaggerated. It's a less extreme light source. It's a little bit more of a natural light source here, because you could see the gradations are gradual. It's not as stark of a difference between the light and the shadow area. So it does have a transition from highlights to midtones to shadows. Highlights, midtones to shadows. There is a gradation to it. So it's very similar, same light source underneath the neck as well. As you could see, the consistency of the shadow form around the forehead on the left side and also on the left side of the neck as well. Then we got this one, which is top down view. You could see this example here. It's just showing that. And pretty much most of the light sources, you're going to get some shadow in the eye socket area just because of the forehead and how it comes out in comparison to other areas. So if you were to see it from profile view, you could see that the cheekbone is behind this right here, and how it really is coming out more in comparison to let's say the nose. So yeah, pay attention to that. Sometimes that varies as well. Some people's foreheads are a different shape as well. Sometimes the mouth and the chin is a little bit further in. So it really does depend on a person's face. But in general, I'm going to say that the forehead is always going to cast shadows underneath, because it dips in. It's less likely that light is going to travel in that direction. And something I like to use as an explanation, think of a light source as a beam rather than water. If water was poured over this face, it would go and follow the shape of the entire face, right? It would really cover it up as much as possible, whereas a beam doesn't work that way. It just shoots straight. Like if the light source is coming from here, it's like shooting down and is just covering whatever, or hitting whatever is poking out, basically. It's not gonna like dip in and really cover up any of those places. So it makes sense that while its trajectory is going this way, anything that's getting covered is not going to get any of that light. So yeah, from this example, you could see that the eye sockets aren't getting much light there. It would be a different case if I did put eyes for this guy, which I will do. But you could see that again, because it is traveling down, the upper lip is blocking any light from reaching underneath the upper lip area. So it's casting a shadow there, but it is actually hitting the bottom lip because it's also protruding out, which causes a shadow underneath the lip itself. And the same thing for the chin as well, because of this hard area and that it starts to curve inwards. The part that's inwards is not going to get much light, forming shadow. The cheekbones, obviously you could see it here. You could see it slightly here as well. A little bit here as well. Not as prominent cheekbones as this example. But just to get a better understanding of it, and something I keep mentioning often, is the peak of a surface area. So because the cheekbones are prominent and they're jotting out, the peak of it is going to get the highlights, and then since it's jotting out, it's naturally going to have lower levels to it, right? So this is the peak, that's going to be a lower eventually until it gets to this area, and the lower levels are just not going to get that light because of the peak blocking it. So then that's where your shadows are going to form based on this light source. Again, it changes if the light source is coming from the left. So that's why it's important to draw these out, to continuously practice, to get yourself a bust of this kind. You don't necessarily, if you really don't want to venture into clay, you could always get one online or a couple of them, and it's great for you to be able to just study how the light changes or light and shadow change according to the light source. That's what's so great about it, as opposed to studying photos. They're both great, they're both excellent hand in hand. They're both excellent separately. But if you have a combination, that's even better. You're going to learn faster, and you're going to have something there for you without having to search for any photos or anything. So moving on to this one. This is a flipped version of this, basically. So, or rather this. It's a flipped version of this. So whatever you see here is going to be reversed. So since this isn't getting any light, now that the light source is coming from the bottom up, then it's going to get light. In most of these examples, that bottom lip is in shadow because it's curving inwards. Now that the light source is coming from the bottom, it's illuminating that area, and it's blocking any, because of the lip, the bottom lip protruding out. It's going to get light source here, and it's going to cast shadow here, as you see here as an example. This is where the shadow forms. This is where the light source is. This is the bottom lip right here. This is the light source underneath. So this area, so this area right here is that right there. That's where the shadow is, right here. So it's getting light there. It's turning into a highlight. Because of this highlight, this isn't getting any light, and it's turned into shadow. So it's flipped. It's basically reversed to what you're seeing here. Underneath the nose, it's getting shadows in this example because of the light source being from the top down. Here it's the opposite. Light source is coming from here, so now this is getting highlights. This is getting highlight. This area is getting highlights as well. So that's pretty much it. I mean, you guys can... I will upload this. I think that it's going to be good practice as well for you guys. You guys can check it out on a Patreon page, which I will be going over. You guys can always access it through the About section in the Twitch channel. And you'll see the link to the Patreon page on the right side. And you guys get access to my work starting with Tier 2, where I upload all these pages that you've been seeing, starting with the first chapter, where I give you guys examples of the human figure and the proportions according to the size of the head. Something that I discussed very frequently. Alright, so just jumping back into this one, this light source. And I'm going to do a quick sketch. I don't think this one's going to take long, unless I start really getting into the minute details. Because in this example, it's completely in shadow. At least this smaller bust, this light source bust. There's like no detail at all whatsoever, and the only detail you see is like the hair. I've been fiddling around with my sketchbooks, my old sketchbooks. I am looking to get a new one, and I was just going through old ones and trying to find the one paper quality, the same as that previous one that I just finished. And it's turning out to be a real search for it, a real hunt. Like, I ended up writing to the company and asking them if they have something exactly like it but bigger in size. So I'm waiting to hear back from them. I also wrote to another company that I heard back from, which I will be talking about tomorrow. I'm pretty excited about that as well. It's some great news. I'm very happy about it. Some of you might guess what it is, but for others, you guys are gonna have to wait until tomorrow. But yeah, I just wrote to the company asking to see if maybe they could recommend something that is exactly the same in terms of texture and thickness, because it really did allow, like that previous sketchbook, unlike this one, it really allowed me to play around with all different types of mediums. And I'm just gonna need it for things like India ink, you know, coloring and stuff. Like, I really want that to be a normal process and not penetrate through to the other side as I'm doing it. So yeah, I was just fiddling around with like my old sketchbooks, trying to see, like, is the paper quality that different from sketchbook to sketchbook? And the answer to that is absolutely. And I could see how it could be a turnoff, kind of like, for me wanting to draw. It really is that important when it comes to traditional. Like, I guess that's another advantage when it comes to digital. Despite it never really, at least for me, it's never going to substitute the traditional method, simply because I don't want to stare at screens. But I guess the edge that digital drawing has is that you don't think about that anymore. It's not about materials as much. It's about you drawing. You know, you have your app, you have your Wacom tablet, and you could just draw. You don't have to think about all these materials and finding them and hunting for them and etc. It's just about drawing, which is excellent, and it's something that I'm looking forward to. But I do think traditional is great. I like that. I'm feeling all these mediums. They're awesome. I just hate having to hunt for the stuff and um yeah, like see if I can find it or not.
Is everybody in the groove? Well, stick around. We're just warming up, baby.
But yeah, there were some sketchbooks that had very like coarse paper, and as I was drawing, I was like, man, I could see how it just doesn't feel as easy and free flowing as it does with like other paper. The graphite on the paper, um, it's just I guess it's kind of hard to describe. It's a certain texture that isn't too slick and that isn't too coarse. It's like it's supposed to be fine, I guess. But each sketchbook, because I have so many of them, each one has a different definition of fine. Because there's like fine texture, there's medium texture, there's coarse texture. And I have a couple of sketchbooks. They're all different. Not all of them, but some. Several. There are different brands, and each brand's definition of fine isn't the same. As well as the thickness of the paper. That's another important thing. So even though I might like the texture of it, because it's so flimsy, I'm like, well, what am I going to do with that? If I'm going to start using India inks often, then this is ruled out, regardless of the quality of the paper or the texture of the paper. So, yeah, I just gotta wait for them to respond, and then once I get a response, I might just like order a bunch and then play around with it a little bit, and the ones that I don't like, just return them. But I just wanted to reach out and see maybe they could answer quickly and give me a good recommendation based off of it. I am thankful for this pencil though. Like the lead in this pencil is a certain quality. Like it has a certain middle ground that I like. It works pretty good with a lot of different type of paper. Like I've tried it out on these old sketchbooks, and I really like how it feels. It's certain. I guess it's like slightly. It's like in between being soft and hard. It's not quite HB because I have an HB pencil, and it still doesn't work as versatilely as with all these different sketchbooks as this one. All right, so I'm not going to spend way more time on this. The entire face is covered up. Maybe there's like a little bit of light hitting the shoulder area, or the neck muscles rather. And I'm just gonna start working on this now. There's some heavy shadowing here. It should be interesting. Because of the heavy shadowing, it should really pop out of this drawing. I unfortunately don't have an art supply around my area. And this is why I encourage you guys to support your local art store, because they're going to go out of business, and that sucks. That's not something that I like shopping online for. I actually really like going to these art stores, and not just for the equipment, but also just possibly meet interesting people. That's another really cool thing. I like talk to people, talk shop with about like art and materials and all that stuff, and actually be able to go and feel this material and look at it and examine it and stuff. It's like going shoe shopping. If you go buy shoes, it's a lot easier and a lot faster to just go to the store, feel them out, look at them, see what they look like on your feet and your outfit and stuff, and then purchase them, as opposed to how it's done online, where you like order it comes in later, you have to try them on. It's a hassle. I hate doing it. But yeah, if you guys shop at your local art store as opposed to ordering online, you get the benefit of actually going and like checking out the materials and purchasing a sketchbook. Like, I feel like that's something that's it's something you really want to feel out for yourself in person. So I'm still keeping it light, despite knowing that, all of this stuff is in shadow. Shadows are pretty dark here. I'm keeping it light because it gives me some playroom. If I make a mistake or if I need to shift some things over, it's still light enough for me to be able to erase. And then just to gradually work, as opposed to like, okay, it's supposed to be dark here, and I'm pressing really hard, and then finding out it's like too dark. Everything in comparison to other areas that have to be in that same range. So by taking it light, I'm still leaving an open window for any adjustments. But something I want to reiterate when it comes to this is nothing on the face is ever as white as the paper itself. Like, that's just tiny dots of highlights basically that are that white. Another thing I wanted to bring up, discuss for a little bit, is the idea of how do you push past disappointment? One day you sit down, you feel inspired, you sit down to draw, but it just seems like anything you're putting down isn't coming out the way you want it to, or it just doesn't look good. How do you push past it? And I think my answer to it, well, there's two. One of them is you just do it, right? You just sit and you keep trying, and you don't focus on the frustration. You don't focus on like, oh, it's not coming out. Like, you don't let all those, you don't start focusing on the doubts that start creeping in. You just focus even more to try to get things down. Or you could step away from that and decide to practice something, like pick something up that you really wanted to draw, like whether it's a comic book thing or a pinup or anything really, and try to render that, and try to get it down as close as possible to the actual image. And I find that to be pretty satisfying. There are points where I have those things. It feels like a bit of a dry spell or something, or I'm not really producing things the way I want to. But the most important part is to continue to draw, because you don't get better by just stopping and then resuming the next day. You might be in more of a flow, or your eyes catching more interesting detail. But really, the best way to go about it would be to just push past it and refocus on something else. Bring your attention to something that really excites you. For example, look at it and you're like, oh, this is beautiful work, and I really want to get it down, and focus on that. And that will help you get into the groove. That will take your focus away from the disappointment of what you were doing, and then might reinvigorate for you to keep trying and trying again. Really, I want to say that it's important to keep in mind the phase when it comes to drawing. So when you sit down, it's kind of like when you go to the gym, right? It's something like I mention frequently as like an example. When you go to the gym, you don't right away start lifting the heaviest weights and doing the most strenuous exercise. You want to first loosen up. You want to get your muscles warmed up. You want to be able to do some stretches so that way you don't injure yourself or something. So and that usually takes some time, right? Maybe like 15-20 minutes or something. With drawing, it's very similar to it. You want to loosen up. You want to get in a state of mind and focus on things that you usually recite to yourself, like making sure you're drawing lightly, making sure you're not pressing too hard on the paper, or you're not pressing down on the pencil as well. You're not pressing on it. You're not giving it the death grip or whatever. Making sure you're keeping an eye out for your entire process of being gradual rather than immediately going into really hard lines. All these things you can check in that time frame of warming up. It allows you to focus and center yourself for it. So if things aren't turning out well, you got to give it some time. You got to wait for that warm-up period to really kick in. And sometimes it might not, it might take longer. It might take you an hour. And then you're going to start feeling like, oh, I'm really, I'm loosening up. My lines are coming out better than I'd like, or better than I expected before, etc. But mainly, the best advice I can give is pushing through it. Because at the end of the day, even if you might not get the best results, you're going to say, I stuck to it and I still continued to draw. And that's going to feel better than being like, what a wasted day. I didn't get anything done. It doesn't look great, etc., etc. And that, how that goes. So it's a way to combat that. You push past and you try to realign yourself in different ways, drawing something from a comic book, drawing something from a reference, to get the inspiration going. I also want to say that sleep is also really important. It might be that you might feel sluggish or you can't focus as much at night or whenever you sit down to do it. So I think getting some good amount of sleep, a healthy amount of sleep, is also key to getting good results, because it does affect your ability to focus, that sort of thing. So make sure you get your daily dose of sleep. I also think looking at comic books is also inspiring. So you might want to like just flip through some stuff, you know, take a look at them, get your creativity excited, look at people's lines and study them and that sort of thing. I think that also helps push past any dry spells or any moments of not having the right motivation or whatnot. It's looking pretty good. Again, one of the very most important things when it comes down to like getting likeness down, right? If you're since I am working from a reference here, or just in general, it doesn't even have to be about that. It could just be about creating a good looking drawing, is to make sure things line up. You know, the eyes line up, and I'm talking about both corners. Really making sure that whatever that you're drawing is halved, right? Since you're going to be drawing that line down the middle, that both halves are equal on all respects, you know. So the shape of the eye itself, the width of the eye should be the same as the width of this eye. The angle of the eye, not one corner higher, the other corner lower in comparison to this one. Like making sure all those things are equal to one another is really, really, really important. Again, it can make or break your drawing if you don't, you know. So the same thing with the lips. Like if one side, for example, is longer than the other side, even though the mouth is isn't smiling, you know, obviously that would change. But nostril, you know, one nostril is higher than the other, or smaller rather than the other, or it's like angled at the other. So making sure to check all those things as you draw is a really good habit. It's something you want to be used to, because sometimes you could overlook it, and I noticed that sometimes in my work as well. Like as I'm doing it, if I'm working from imagination, it tends to creep up. So I have to keep it in check, and I always have to like double check everything and be like, okay, is it on the same exact line? Let's say towards the bottom of the eyes, are they lining up on the same line? Are the corner of the eyes on the same line as well? The same goes for the other corners. The chin area. This is something that I mentioned before, like the parts where the chin turns inwards, you know, these little corners right here, they have to be on the same line as well. You know, you don't want one to be higher up here and then the other one lower on a frontal view. It just wouldn't look right. It would break the fourth wall. So it seems about right. You know, I think this is pretty accurate. So now I'm gonna start towards the next phase of darkening things up. And now it's easier. Now that I've made sure everything kind of lines up, you know, in terms of highlights, midtones, and shadows, anatomy, that sort of thing. And now it's easier because I don't have to worry about any of those things, and it's just going to be a matter of fine-tuning shading. it is a thinking process, because you have to ask yourself, how dark is this in comparison to the cheekbone? Are they pretty close in darkness? You know, because you want to have a consistent gradation and tone going all the way around the face. So as I mentioned, nothing is as white on the face as the paper. Maybe just with exceptions of little dots of highlights. But everything else is pretty dark when it comes to shading. So I'm just gonna try to push that to the next level. Just little by little, pressing a little more firmly on the paper. No, really, it's supposed to be a lot darker there anyways. Again, I'm gonna make a comparison and ask myself, like, how dark is the shadow on the forehead area in comparison to the darkest dark shadow on any other part? So now that I've established, like, okay, here it's gonna be really, really dark in comparison to anywhere else. And then from there, I could gauge other areas. I can be like, okay, how much darker is this to this? You know, is it pretty close? And again, you want to have consistency, right, in terms of the light source. So if the light source really seems like it's coming from, this is supposed to be above back, right? So the hair is supposed to get the most amount, but still, in the example, it seems like the light source is towards above, above and slightly towards the back, but it is also creeping up on this area right here. So you're gonna see some lighter sections. It's not gonna be obviously as dark as this. Taking my time comparing all the areas underneath the eye, for example. How much darker is it than like the darkest shadow? underneath the nose, obviously. Now I'm going to go into the neck area and do it as dark as other areas. So as dark as it is here. It's just following the pattern of the shadows. I'm being very careful about adding shadows here because if you guys noticed, even the slightest change in the lines can give her a totally different face expression. It's very sensitive, like, you know, these areas on the face are so sensitive because any little adjustment, even the corner of the mouth, as I mentioned very frequently, could mean happier or just neutral face or sad. You know, it really could be that big of a difference. And the same thing when it comes to eyebrows as well. They could be very expressive. Eyebrows could be very expressive. So if you make the line a little bit too steep, it might end up looking like the person is nervous or upset or something. So trying to be very careful when it comes to shading around here. And now I'm gonna go back and start getting darker in these areas. So you guys see how I pretty much worked on everything. Just fleshed out everything as much as possible before taking it to the next level with shadows. And now I could do the same thing again, create that same pattern to work on everything evenly. Oh man, time is creeping up, which you guys know what is gonna have to happen next. I am gonna have to end the stream for figure drawing basics. Take a quick 5-minute break, get ready for the next stream, which is the project stream. And in that stream, you guys, for those of you who are brand new to the Art Lounge Alley, that is going to be where I work on something from my imagination. So I'm pretty excited to get back into it, get further along in it, and take it to the next stage, which is going to be coloring. And that's going to be pretty challenging as well, because there's a lot going on there. So I'm pretty I'm curious what it's going to end up looking like, especially with colors and stuff. So stick around for that. I'll be back in 5. And if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you remember to hit the like and subscribe button. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in just a few.